We're live. Are we here? Do we make it?
Hello.
Great.
Hey, everybody.
We
Welcome.
got it.
Welcome. So let's get started. Just a quick reminder, IWR episode 4, caller Texas, 785-363-5045. We're here 24/7. We want your tips. We want your feedback. We want your thoughts. Put your all into it. We'll be here ready when you are. So what's on the screen? What are we looking at?
Yeah, well, this is really exciting. This is actually a text that we received at the IWR hotline, I think a week ago or something like that. And it was responding to the last IWR number 3 that we did about the Texas power grid. And we're not going to read all of it because it's very long, but I am going to read a little bit of it or parts of it because it is really just a fascinating bit of research. So here's the text. Someone says, "Hello, please get this out to Governor Abbott as soon as possible." They're doing their own Texas power grid research. They say, "Something is not sitting right with me with Texas, and it's not just the weather. I mean, it really bothers me, these millions of Texas families that are suffering. I couldn't sleep, actually, so I woke up this morning, made coffee, and got to researching. I started pulling Biden's EOs this morning and found something buried in the Keystone Pipeline EO. EO stands for Executive Order, if you're not familiar, way towards the end of the dock. It turns out that the same day Biden shut down the Keystone Pipeline, he also lifted the security on our power grid for 90 days. Trump's EO from the year prior secured our power grid by giving China no access. Here below is the snippet buried in Biden's Keystone Pipeline EO. It says, Executive Order 13920 of May 1st, 2020, securing the United States bulk power system is hereby suspended for 90 days. The Secretary of Energy and the Director of the OMB shall jointly consider whether to recommend that a replacement order, I made a typo, be issued." Just a small little paragraph tucked away in one of Biden's EOs on the first day in office under the umbrella of restoring science to tackle the climate crisis. You can find it here, and this person helpfully provided the link, and indeed this passage does exist there. And so then they say, "So I researched our energy transformers that supply our power grid." Trump's EO states this snippet, interestingly enough. And so Trump's EO says, May 1st, 2020 order, President Trump stated that the United States should no longer purchase transformers and other electric grid equipment manufactured in China. He signaled that it is important to end relationships that U.S. utilities have directly with Chinese businesses and multinational companies manufacturing transformers in China, which are later plugged into the electrical grid in the United States. It goes on to talk about the fact that Chinese power equipment can be embedded with software and hardware that can be remotely accessed, enhancing China's ability to commit cyber attacks. And then it sort of talks about how big transformers are, and so it's really easy to hide potential software or hardware that can be used to attack the power grid, and then linked to Trump's EO. Talks a little bit about how there aren't that many US power transformer manufacturers, but there are a lot of Chinese ones. And then gets to sort of the conclusion of the text. Sorry, we'll wrap it up in just a sec. That basically says, if you look up Electric Panda, asks us to Google that, you will wonder why the heck this isn't front page news now with Texas. And this is the key part right here, where it says, conclusively, Biden, on his first day in office, opened up the American electrical grid to China, his very first day of office. 3 weeks later, 5 million are without power and struggling to keep their families warm, and many livestock are unable to survive the emergent conditions caused by, I think this is a typo, but caused by my power and limited water. Please consider this important information, Governor Abbott, as you pursue the truth with this ERCOT debacle and Texas and the federal government's role in it. We need to shut down ERCOT. And for those of you who weren't with us last week, that is the Texas specific power supply company. And we need to establish a totally new Texas First Utilities entity staffed by Texans, real Texans on the leadership board and day-to-day team. And then this person very helpfully volunteers to bring their technology background to bear. So that is the text. There's a lot going on there. What do you all think about that?
Hot diggity dog.
I mean, I think there's a lot. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot there. I mean, there's a couple of there's a couple of claims in there, and I think there's a lot to be considered. But I think the upshot for me is, did Biden open the power grid to China on his first day in office? I think that's the main conclusion that you pointed out, the last bit there, Arthur. And I think that's probably where we should ahead, but I'd be interested to hear everyone's thoughts.
I mean, first of all, I just want to say thanks.
Yeah, for
you know,
sure. Yeah, no, thanks for all this research and like the energy that you put into it. Because I think we all know that there are bad actors out there who want to hack our infrastructure. And I
Sure.
think Duke, you did a little research on that, or maybe it was Arthur. Like, yeah, there are bad actors around the world who are trying to get into our infrastructure and mess stuff up and attack us. But I think, yeah, to Emily's point, the question is, did Biden somehow intentionally open up the energy grid to China in such a way that would leave us vulnerable to an attack from them? And especially because, like, does Biden even have control over the Texas energy grid, which we know actually from last week is Texas owned?
Yep.
So
Right. And in fact, that was one of the problems that people cited that potentially led to the outages last week, is that Texas is alone and operating a completely independent grid.
yeah.
So I guess like, you know, where do we start? We want to look, you know, first I think we should just go and kind of go back to the beginning here. I mean, I think this you know, this tip came in and it talks about how Biden, you know, right there, Executive Order 13920 of May 1st, 2020, securing the United States bulk power system is hereby suspended for 90 days. The Secretary of Energy and the Director of OMB shall jointly consider whether recommend that a replacement order be issued. So I mean, there's a link there to that, to Biden's EO on the first day. I mean, maybe we start there and just, you know, get familiar with what it is that's being discussed in this.
I mean, I looked at this, Duke, and that's all it says, basically, is that it's rolling back this order. But it is important, I think, to consider the context of this document. You know, it's an executive order on protecting public health and the environment and restoring science to tackle the climate crisis. And so I think the big question I have, you know, that I would want to answer is, does Biden have a good reason for repealing this executive order, and what does this executive order actually do? Because I think, you know, maybe he is. I think it's unlikely. Maybe he is just opening the door to China. I think that's kind of unlikely. But are there other reasons why, you know, he might actually want to repeal this executive order? So that's the first place my mind goes. Anybody else have thoughts about that?
No, I think that's a great place to start.
Cool. So ideas.
Yeah. Right. So why don't we go to the specifics of what it was repealing, right?
So here they provided a link.
Our texter actually put that little EO
right.
snippet in for us,
So helpful.
which was about Chinese businesses and multinational companies, right?
Right.
And the power equipment.
Right. I want to just double check that that's actually in there. This felt a little, you know, didn't have that sort of official language typically of the executive order. So I just opened this and I just want to look at this, and maybe we can find, you know, like 100 tons, see if that's in there. I did this before and I couldn't find this specific, you know, these specific phrases that this person was quoting. So I think this is a little bit of editorializing.
What if we Google the phrase itself, like a significant part, just to see where it pops up?
Sure. I mean, the United States should no longer purchase transformers and other. Let's do this because that's specifically stating that. And I should say, you know, this does say parts of this, right? It says, I find that foreign adversaries are increasingly creating and exploiting vulnerabilities in the United States, you know, bulk power system. But interestingly, it doesn't mention China. I'm searching for it once. It doesn't really mention any of that stuff.
Transformers?
Let's see. It does mention transformers. So it says bulk power electric system equipment means items used in this bulk power generation, transformers, etc. But it doesn't. It's actually not that long. It doesn't say a lot, except that, you know, effectively, like, you can't buy this equipment from a foreign adversary. I want to make sure it even says that. Yeah, that's right. So it says you can't buy it from a foreign adversary.
Does it define foreign adversary anywhere?
That's a great question. The term foreign adversary means any foreign government or foreign non-government person engaged in a long-term pattern of serious instances of conduct significantly adverse to the national security of the United States or its allies and the security and safety of United States persons. So that is a very broad definition.
And it's mentioned 3 times in this document. Where else does it show up?
So here it says under prohibitions and implementation that if the transaction involves, I mean, we read this before, if the transaction involves a foreign adversary, it can't be done. And the other time is that it's directing the Secretary of Energy, I believe, in consultation with other people from national security and the Tennessee Valley Authority to identify what equipment actually poses a risk. So this doesn't even say necessarily that they know what equipment poses a risk, but it says that they think some of it might, and they wanna take a look at that, basically. So this is research.
Well, I think your point, Arthur, well made, that the foreign adversary definition is really broad, and I think let's, for the sake of this, assume that China is a foreign adversary under what our hipster has provided for us. But that's like,
you said tipster, not hipster, right? It sounded like hipster.
I said tipster.
Oh, tipster.
Right.
Cool. Okay.
We're gonna call our tipsters hipsters from now on, but keep going.
In any case, I think that what this document is basically saying is that, like, we don't want to buy transformers from a foreign adversary, and for the sake of this argument, that would include China. So that seems to be maybe not the direct language that was provided to us, but gets at the heart of what was kind of expressed, or how.
I mean, I'm gonna I don't know where this is gonna lead us, but just for the sake of trying to maybe untangle some of this a little bit, it's like if we go back to the original question, can you go back to the original question? It's like, did Biden open the energy grid to China on his first day in office? I think it's worth considering that, like, there's a couple different sort of angles here. One is, are we susceptible to foreign adversaries through sort of like hardware and software attacks? Which I think there's, if we were to spend some time sort of looking at that, like, I'm sure that I think we could probably find examples of when that has happened, especially from adversaries of ours. But the sort of like the other piece of it, this is sort of like, part of this question is, I mean, the way that this read to me is that, somehow Trump had sort of put an end to this. Biden comes into office. On his first day in office, he sort of like opens the door that's going to allow China to come in and to basically take over the power grid, in this case specifically in Texas. And so from my understanding of how like hardware and software works, it's like, if that was the case, it would have already had to have been implemented, right? Like there's nothing like what is it that Biden would do or could do to an existing sort of power grid that would either, prevent or allow China to be able to come in sort of that quickly to do it? It just sort of on the surface, it feels like if there was any vulnerability, that vulnerability would have already been pre-existing. It's not like Biden sort of lifts the sort of like opens the door, and then because he opens the door, a bunch of people come in and they change
install
the hardware and
all of a sudden,
like install some sort of transformer all of a sudden, like.
And also, let's just say this: he didn't rescind that executive order that Trump made. He suspended it, which doesn't mean that we're going to actively import a bunch of Chinese transformers in 90 days. It just means that, like, hold up, like, let's make an assessment here, and then, like, not just like wholesale, like, keep this policy in place. We're just going to see if, we need to change some things. So actually, it doesn't mean that, like, we're immediately going to import Chinese transformers in 90 days and then shut the door again. Right.
And I think that would be, really silly of Biden to do. But I also think, just to underscore the point you made, Duke, like what could really happen in 3 weeks? I mean, part of the problem with this that I have, analyzing this text is that it seems to claim, I mean, I know this is the question that we pulled out, but it seems to claim as evidence that yes, in fact, Biden opened the energy grid to China, that, Texas's grid went down, right? And it seems to say that these two events are somehow related. And the truth is, either, as you point out, Duke, those vulnerabilities were already there, or they would have had to have been installed in 3 weeks, which I'm not an engineer, electrical engineer, whoever designs those systems, but I'm willing to bet, right, that it takes more than 3 weeks, to install enough new transformers to make this vulnerable. And so the only thing that I think they could be claiming, and maybe we should consider this, is that it was all a signaling thing, right? And that President Biden sort of signaled to China, yeah, come in and attack us. And I don't know about you, but that seems pretty odd to me. But what do you all think?
Well, it also
I
completely,
don't.
yeah, it just completely doesn't. How is the weather accounted for in that whole position?
Right, right. That's a good point too.
As much as I believe, I mean, as we all kind of said, like there is evidence of like tampering and hacking, and that's like just how countries operate today. That's fine, but like, can any single executive order or country control the weather? No.
Right. I
And-
mean,
And
weather's weird.
also, weather is weird. And also, my question is like, if Biden really did want to open up the energy grid to China, and like, it doesn't seem to help anybody to shut down an entire state's power and like hurt so many people so early in his game in office. Like, if I were to just put on my like evil person brain for a moment, like, why blow your evil load in the first 3 weeks of office? That seems a little weird.
That's right. That's right.
Like, I don't know. So maybe, yeah, you're like setting up the stage for some sort of like evil plot to allow China to like infiltrate our energy grid. But also, like, it's not like China was making, like, who does that benefit? I don't
Yeah.
really know. And also,
Yeah.
like, Biden doesn't even have control over ERCOT.
Right. It's
Yeah.
a state power institution.
I
So
mean,
It's a
just
state
can we
power
just,
thing.
granted, sorry to interrupt there. I mean, but like, I just to sort of play this out just a little bit more. I mean, like, I doubt we would know. There wouldn't necessarily be sort of a public
right.
document that's going to say that China has hacked the power grid. But like, let's just, for the sake of it, let's just search like Chinese hacking responsible for Texas power outage, just to see if there's anything out there that is suggesting that.
Let's take a look. I mean, there's some stuff from December. That's all before. This doesn't have. We can look at this NPR article if we want. There's an article from 2008 that maybe they played a role. So yeah, this seems to have been.
Yeah, and I guess I sort of.
It's not impossible.
No, I think that's really the sort of the thing that I wanted to say. I mean, I don't think that it's necessarily impossible that would have happened.
Yeah.
I just don't. To me, it's not like a political thing. It's like it's an issue of national security, and
Yeah.
and like from what I know about national security is that like we do have some really smart people. I mean, like they call them the electric pandas. Like I don't know what we call them, but like I'm sure we have some version of the electric pandas here in the U.S. that their job is to make sure that like we don't let any crazy electric pandas into our power grid, and so it's like I think it's a totally reasonable and probably justified sort of like conclusion to come to around like our power grid is probably under attack, and there are probably foreign adversaries that are trying to sort of take it out. And I think that that's why we pay our taxes, and that's why we employ really smart, interesting people to sort of defend it and to defend us. I think the thing for me on this one is that like it's just not a political issue, and that like
maybe, why would Biden be wanting to do this?
It just doesn't. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so
an executive order is not going to just
Right.
like open a door for hacking,
Right.
because they would hack it anyway, it sounds like.
Right.
And
Right.
I don't know.
No, that's a
It's
good point. So,
strange
but
to me.
but I think that gets us to a point where I think is really important here, which is to ask, okay, what are the reasons that Biden might have done this? What I think this text does is it jumps to this conclusion about China really quickly in a way that is pulling together some strands that make sense, but maybe doesn't ask the question, are there legitimate reasons for Biden wanting to overturn this? And I did a little bit of research on this, when this text came in, and I found this article in the National Law Review. Just so folks know,
When
we
it's
always
2020, so that's pre the power grid.
right. So it's from before the power grid thing, and it's just sort of for folks who are wondering what this is. It's been publishing for a really long time, since 1888, and it's pretty nonpartisan, and it just sort of looks at and evaluates all kinds of different laws, and so their function is just to sort of look at them. And so, yeah, this is from way before any of these power grid issues.
Before Biden was even elected.
Before Biden was in office, yeah, and it's looking at
Yeah.
at what this order does, and it has a couple of really interesting things to say about it. And I think that mirrors a lot of what we've been saying. So first of all, it says, there's a great point where it says, let me see if I can find it. There's a point where it acknowledges that yes, there is a risk to our bulk power system. Whoops. No, thank you. But it highlights a bunch of problems with this. And so it says several features of the executive order are potentially problematic, particularly for renewable generation owners, i.e. green energy owners. And again, going back to Biden's executive order, it was all about green energy. It says it's broad in its application, like Emily said, on its face appears to cover most types of generation equipment. It includes, not just transformers, but power substations and generators and turbines and backup generators, which means like almost all solar and wind equipment. It contains no guidance on who might be an acceptable vendors, which countries are foreign adversaries, what type of transactions are permissible. And so, it seems like the purpose of the executive order by Trump may not have been so much to ban anything. It just may have been to give the Trump administration, complete oversight over any of these transactions. And so,
it
seems like
seems like it benefits like non-renewable energy. Like
right.
It seems like
Exactly.
it benefits oil and gas and
Exactly.
things like that. So it could just be more of a lobbying push.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And so
kill the competition.
That's right. And so it basically, their conclusion of it is basically that it's so broad, it gives so much power to the government to decide who can and can't produce energy, that it's overly broad. And so, they conclude though, and I think this is important, there is considerable merit to securing the US bulk power system, but the executive order is arguably not the least restrictive means of doing so, particularly for certain industry segments, as you point out, Amelie, renewable energy. And so, if you're Joe Biden and you're coming in and climate change is important to you, it makes total sense to not remove immediately, but to suspend, as you pointed out, Amelie, this executive order. And so I think there is an alternative explanation for this that makes sense and isn't diabolical, which is, I think, an important thing to understand. So,
well, yeah. I think.
What does diabolical mean?
Isn't evil and calculated.
Ah, okay. Thank you.
Well, and I think to your point, Arthur, and I think to your point is just that, there is a reason, there's an agenda reason for having suspended Trump's previous executive order. That agenda kind of item, or that like policy differential, which is pretty clear, like, it's that renewable energy debate. It's the environmental kind of like, that's a pretty very obvious policy point there that makes complete sense for Biden to have done this. That doesn't necessitate or implicate China's hacking of the Texas power grid.
That's right. Yeah. And you can believe in or like that policy or not. You can like Biden's direction or Trump's direction, but that doesn't mean that, there's this conspiracy.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, it's like, I don't believe that any president, Republican, Democrat, Independent, whatever, is going to put America in a situation, any American in a situation where we're going to allow any sort of foreign entity or foreign adversary to like take out a power grid and sort of like wipe out the power for like hundreds of thousands or millions of Americans. I just don't think that that's the case. Number one, I think also I support like our defense, and I just support the folks, the hardworking military and defense people who are working hard to make sure that that's the case. Whoever is out there that is our version of the Electric Panda, thank you. Because I know that you're working right now to protect our power grid. And so, for me, it's not a political thing. This is a thing about, American security and like protecting our power grid, protecting like, energy for all Americans. But it's just not political for me. It's about defense. It's about security. And I just don't think that, like, just based off of some common sense, I just don't think there's anything that Biden could have done that all of a sudden would have made it so that like these people would have gone in and replaced the transformers and created these software loopholes that would allow a foreign adversary to sort of take out our power grid. Also, and then I'll just be quiet after this, but like also, I do think that like it is as a concern. And I think that there is precedent that says that there are people trying to hack our power grid, and it is worth considering. I just don't think it's a political issue. And in this case, I just think, this is probably, in my opinion, more to do with the weird weather than anything else, and some of the stuff we talked about last week. So
I kind of agree with you, Arthur or Duke, because I think that it is a policy issue, even if it's political. Like with the first one, it seems like Trump, he was concerned about defense, but also it benefited clearly non-renewable energy companies over renewable energy companies. Yeah. And then Biden's executive order, which is a different policy that is more like pro-renewables and like climate change mitigation, he comes in and he says, you know what, no, like this former executive order did, benefit a different group, like a different part of the sector, and we care about something else now, so that's why we're going to overturn it. And it still doesn't mean that we're going to open up and buy transformers from China or things like that necessarily. As I said, it wasn't rescinded, it was suspended. So I think like my conclusion here is that one was pro one side of the market and the other was pro the other side of the market. And while there's a national security risk, this is more about a battle between renewables and non-renewables. And like that isn't so, and like, you know what, there's going to be people trying to attack both. So we just need to know, we need to just keep our eyes open that maybe the United States needs to be more competitive in its renewable energy market and manufacturing in order to fight against bad actors.
Awesome. And thanks for getting us to those quick conclusions. Let's go around. Duke, what's your quick conclusion?
I think I already gave mine.
All right. What if you summarize it in a sentence? What is it?
We need electric pandas.
All right, Emily.
I mean, mine going back to the question, which is, did Biden open the energy grid? Potentially. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not sure it was ever closed to China because they weren't defined as specific adversaries, but he definitely suspended something that might allow China to have some play in the U.S. energy market, but it certainly didn't cause the power outage because, as Duke said, weather's weird.
Nice. And mine is just going to be, I think, there is a reasonable explanation for Biden's EO that doesn't include China. And I think, it's a much simpler explanation and a more obvious one. And I kind of go with that myself.
And also has nothing to do with the Texas power outage.
Right. Definitely.
So these things are not connected necessarily. But maybe they are connected in that we need more competitive, enduring, and powerful sorts of like resilient energy in Texas.
Yeah.
Got it. Yep.
Anyways.
Yeah, don't even get me started about it.
But yeah,
That's
but
really
this
good
was a
point.
really
All right. All right. Well,
I think that this was a really great question, and I encourage more folks to bring up stuff like this. Feel free to disagree with us or find, more problems with our conclusions. But I think that we just need to look a little deeper and not just take like face value connections.
absolutely.
Exactly.
Totally.
Yeah, we look forward to hearing from them.
Where Duke,
Yeah.
where can they hear from us? Or where can they
Oh,
get in touch
yeah.
with us?
Thank you. This is episode 4. Remember, call or text 785-363-5045. We'll look forward to hearing from you all.
Bye, everybody.
Peace.